The sky does not fall all at once. It begins as a light brighter than noon, a second sun ripping across the late Cretaceous air, and then the world answers with fire. Somewhere near the warm, shallow sea that will one day become the Gulf of Mexico, a mountain-sized asteroid strikes Earth with a force that no living creature has ever known. Rock becomes vapor, seawater erupts into the atmosphere, forests flatten, the ground rings like a struck bell. Far from the impact, beyond the first wall of heat and pressure, dinosaurs still stand in river plains, among flowering shrubs, along the edges of fern-filled forests, unaware that the rules of the planet have changed. The catastrophe does not need to find every animal at once. It only needs to darken the sun, poison the seasons, collapse the green world, and wait. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. For more than 150 million years, dinosaurs have shaped the surface of Earth. They are not a single empire in the simple sense, but a vast and shifting dynasty of bodies-horned grazers, armoured wanderers, duck-billed herds, long-necked giants, feathered hunters, and tyrannosaurs with skulls built like siege weapons. They live in a world already full of change. Sea levels rise and fall, continents drift, flowering plants spread, insects diversify, mammals exist, but mostly at the margins, small, alert, and easily overlooked beneath the weight of reptilian grandeur. Then, at the end of the Cretaceous, the balance fails. The Chicxulub impact is not just an explosion, it is a planetary interruption, a sudden violence followed by a long silence. The first hours are almost beyond imagination. Near the impact zone, no ordinary survival is possible. The asteroid punches through crust and carbonate rock, blasting debris high into the atmosphere. Some of that material falls back as incandescent particles, heating the sky itself. Across great distances, wildfires may ignite, though scholars still debate their exact extent and intensity. Tsunamis tear through ancient coastlines. Earthquakes ripple through the crust. In the oceans, sediments are churned into chaos. On land, animals that survive the first shock face something stranger and slower, a world in which daylight itself becomes unreliable. Dust, soot, sulfate aerosols, and vaporized rock spread through the atmosphere. The sun turns pale, photosynthesis falters, plants die back, food chains that once seemed permanent begin to come apart. This is why the disappearance of the non-avian dinosaurs is not best imagined as a single instant. Even if the triggering moment is sudden, extinction unfolds through systems. A giant herbivore does not merely need to avoid fire or falling stone. It needs living plants, stable seasons, water sources, breeding success, and enough time for young animals to grow. A large predator needs the herbivores, eggs need suitable conditions, forest dwellers need forests, wetland animals need wetlands. When the base of the living world is damaged, size becomes a burden. Specialization becomes a trap. The magnificent designs that once made dinosaurs dominant now become difficult to maintain. No single explanation fully accounts for every extinction pattern. But the broad picture is clear. The impact strikes a biosphere already shaped by volcanic unrest, climatic stress, and ecological tension. And the result is a filter harsher than anything most lineages can pass through. The Deccan Traps, enormous volcanic eruptions in what is now India, are part of that darker background. They did not arrive as a single volcanic blast, but as immense pulses of lava and gas over long spans of time around the end of the Cretaceous. Their role remains debated. Some researchers emphasize the asteroid as the decisive blow, Others point to volcanic gases, climate swings, sulfur, fluorine, and carbon dioxide as stresses that may have weakened ecosystems before or alongside the impact. The safest way to tell the story is not to replace one catastrophe with another, but to see the late Cretaceous Earth as a world under pressure, and Chicxulub as the strike that made recovery impossible for many forms of life. The evidence remains incomplete in places, but the boundary clay, shocked minerals, global signals of impact debris, and abrupt biological losses all point toward a rare moment when geology becomes fate. And yet, this is not the end of life. It is the end of one arrangement of life. Beneath the ash, inside burrows, under roots, along stream banks, in rotten logs, in the sheltered cracks of a broken landscape, small animals endure. Some are birds, the living branch of dinosaurs that will carry feathers into the future. Some are reptiles, amphibians, fish, insects, and freshwater survivors with life cycles flexible enough to weather darkness. And some are mammals. They are not waiting with a plan. Evolution has no plan, but their bodies carry possibilities that the ruined world now rewards. Many are small, many can hide, some can eat seeds, insects, carrion, fungi, roots, or whatever scraps remain when green abundance collapses. Some can grow quickly, some can reproduce in shorter cycles than the vanished giants. Warm-blooded bodies, fur, sensitive noses, and night-adapted habits do not make them invincible, but in a cold, dim world, they matter. The surprising detail is that mammals were not new arrivals. They had lived alongside dinosaurs for tens of millions of years, diversifying in the shadows, trying many forms even before the asteroid. Some climbed, some dug, some glided, some hunted insects, some cracked harder foods. The older story, in which mammals simply cowered until dinosaurs vanished, is too simple. What survives in the record suggests something more subtle. Mammals were already experimenting. The extinction did not create them from nothing. It removed many of the largest competitors and predators from the landscape, opening space that had long been difficult to occupy. After the boundary, the survivors do not instantly become elephants, whales, bats, apes, or humans. Instead, they begin with small advantages in a wounded world, and those advantages accumulate. The land after the extinction would not have looked like a paradise waiting to be inherited. It would have been raw, uneven, and unstable. In some places, ferns may have been among the first plants to spread across disturbed ground, forming the famous fern spike seen in parts of the fossil record. Forests recover in stages, not all at once. Rivers carry ash and eroded soil. Insects return to damaged vegetation. Seeds lie buried. Mushrooms and decay organisms feed on the dead. The atmosphere slowly clears. Light strengthens. The first new green patches become islands of opportunity. For an animal small enough to hide in a burrow or move through tangled regrowth, the recovering world is dangerous but open. For a giant dependent on vast daily intake, it is almost empty. Here, the long road toward apes begins, though no ape yet exists, and nothing walking through that Paleocene dawn resembles one. This distinction matters. The disappearance of the non-avian dinosaurs around 66 million years ago does not produce apes in any immediate sense. True apes, the hominoids, belong to a much later chapter, tens of millions of years in the future, especially in the Miocene. But the first conditions that make that later chapter possible begin here, in the ecological aftermath of destruction. The world is no longer ruled by the same bodies. The canopy will return. Mammals will climb into it. Vision, grasping, balance, and social awareness will slowly become more valuable in certain branches of the mammalian tree. Long before apes swing, knuckle walk, or walk upright, tiny ancestors and relatives of primates will begin testing the edges of branches in forests reborn from catastrophe. There is a strange humility in that sequence. The asteroid does not aim at dinosaurs so mammals can rise. It does not clear a path for primates, or apes, or humans, or any later creature able to study the scar it left behind. It is simply a collision between a rocky body and a living planet. But consequences do not need intention. From the crater and the darkness comes a rearranged Earth. From the rearranged Earth comes the age of mammals. From the age of mammals comes the long branching experiment of primates. And from one far later branch of that experiment will come creatures who look back at the clay line in the rocks and understand, with unease, that their own deep history begins not with triumph, but with survival after a world-ending day. In the dim world after the impact, survival belongs less to power than to position. The animals that endure are not the tallest, the loudest, or the most spectacular. They are the ones already living close to the ground, close to shelter, close to the hidden machinery of the planet. While the great bodies of the Cretaceous vanish from open plains and forest margins, many mammals occupy smaller spaces where catastrophe arrives softened by soil, roots, water, darkness, and decay. They do not conquer the ruins. At first they simply remain, and in that remaining something enormous begins. To imagine them clearly, it helps to forget the familiar mammals of the later world. These are not lions, horses, elephants, whales, bats, or apes. Most are small enough to fit into the hands of a modern human. Many look, from a distance, vaguely like shrews, squirrels, rats, or opossums, although those comparisons can be misleading because their lineages are older and stranger than any living example. Their teeth are the best witnesses to their lives. In the fossil record, jaws and molars often outlast bodies, and from these fragments paleontologists reconstruct diets with careful caution. Some teeth are sharp for insects, some are suited for crushing, some hint at fruit, seeds, or mixed feeding. A tooth can preserve an entire world of behavior, but only an outline, and scholars still debate the exact habits of many early Paleocene mammals because the evidence remains incomplete. What gives these animals an advantage is not one heroic trait, but a combination of modest ones. Small size means lower food demands. Burrowing or nesting in protected spaces means some insulation from heat, cold, fire, and exposure. Nocturnal habits, inherited from long ages under dinosaur dominance, become useful when the sky darkens and the days lose their old rhythm. A sensitive sense of smell helps in a landscape where food may be scattered, hidden, or rotting. Flexible diets matter enormously. An animal able to eat insects, seeds, dead material, fungi, or hard scraps has more chances than an animal dependent on one kind of fresh vegetation. In a broken ecosystem, the generalist is often less elegant than the specialist, but more difficult to erase. This is one reason the old image of mammals as timid background creatures needs to be softened. They were small, yes, and many probably avoided larger dinosaurs with the practical wisdom of anything that intends to stay alive, but they were not evolutionary failures waiting for permission. By the late Cretaceous, mammals had already explored underground life, tree climbing, gliding, swimming margins, insect hunting, and many varieties of feeding. Some were capable predators at their scale. Some were ecological opportunists. They had fur, warm-blooded metabolism, more complex teeth than many reptiles, and reproductive strategies that could respond more quickly to shifting conditions. The asteroid does not turn them from nothing into rulers. It removes constraints that had long shaped where they could go and how large they could become. In the first years and centuries after the impact, however, the word rise would feel almost too grand. The world is not suddenly inviting. A mammal emerging from a burrow into the Paleocene dawn is entering a damaged place. The canopy may be gone or patchy. Insects may surge in some areas and collapse in others. Rivers may be clogged with ash and sediment. The old seasonal signals may be distorted. Food webs are being rewritten by hunger. For many survivors, life is probably narrow, local, and precarious. A lineage survives not because every individual thrives, but because enough individuals find enough food in enough places for one generation to become another. That is the quiet mathematics of recovery. Extinction removes lineages, survival preserves options. A few thousand animals in the right pockets of landscape can matter more than millions in the wrong ones. Freshwater environments may offer refuge because rivers, lakes, wetlands, and floodplains preserve food chains based partly on detritus, buried organic matter, and aquatic productivity. Seeds can endure where leaves fail. Insects can feed on dead wood and decay. Carrion becomes a grim resource, though it cannot sustain the world forever. The animals that make it through are often those tied to these hidden reserves, those able to wait out the worst of the darkness and expand when green life returns. One lesser-known part of this story is how quickly mammal bodies begin to change once the bottleneck passes. The early Cenozoic does not simply produce more mammals, it produces mammals trying new shapes of life. Some lineages increase in body size, others experiment with new teeth, limbs, and habits. The first 10 million years after the extinction are a period of ecological trial, not a simple march toward modern forms. In some regions, the record suggests a pattern where body size and general robustness may expand before more specialized feeding equipment fully develops. That detail is important because it shows how evolution works under opportunity. First, surviving mammals may push into newly available space, becoming larger or more varied in posture and movement. Later, as ecosystems stabilize and competition sharpens, their jaws, teeth, and behaviors refine into more specialized roles. The phrase "age of mammals" can make this sound clean, as if a curtain falls on dinosaurs and rises on a new cast already waiting in costume. The truth is messier and more interesting. Birds, the surviving dinosaurs, continue to diversify. Crocodilians remain in waterways. Turtles, lizards, snakes, amphibians, fish, and insects persist in their own lines. Mammals become more prominent, but not alone. They are one set of survivors among many, and their success depends on interactions with plants, climate, geography, and other animals. What survives in the record suggests not a coronation, but a long negotiation with a changed planet. Somewhere inside that negotiation lies the distant ancestry of primates, not yet in the form of grasping hands and forward-facing eyes, perfected for canopies, but in the broader mammalian world where small-bodied, alert, flexible animals begin to exploit recovering forests. The later road toward primates will depend on branches, fruit, insects, flowers, and three-dimensional movement through trees. It will depend on the return of complex vegetation. But before any of that can happen, Mammals must endure the boundary itself and then spread into the ecological space left open by the vanished giants. The first step toward the primate story is not a leap into the trees. It is the persistence of small mammals through planetary winter. This makes the post-impact world both bleak and strangely fertile. It is bleak because extinction has stripped Earth of forms that once seemed permanent. It is fertile because emptiness, in evolutionary time, is never empty for long. A vacant niche is an invitation written in climate, food, shelter, and competition. Mammals answer it in many different ways. Some lines will lead nowhere. Some will flourish for a while and disappear. Some will branch into hoofed animals, carnivores, bats, whales, rodents, and countless vanished experiments, and one small portion of that broader radiation will eventually lead toward animals that live by touch, balance, sight, memory, and social attention in the trees. The hidden survivors do not know any of this. They do not know that the great reptilian order has been broken, or that their descendants will one day fill continents, oceans, skies, and forest canopies. They move through darkness by scent and tremor, listening for danger, searching for edible fragments in a world still settling from impact. Their story is quiet, almost invisible, preserved in teeth, jaws, ankle bones, and rare skeletons. But history often turns on such quiet things. Long after the firestorm fades, long after the crater cools, long after ferns and saplings begin to cover the scars, the mammals that waited below become the foundation of a new world above. When the light returns, it does not return to the same planet. The first green after catastrophe is low, opportunistic, and patient. Ferns spread where taller forests have been stripped away. Shoots push through disturbed soil. Seeds that waited in darkness open when warmth and moisture allow it. Along rivers, in sheltered valleys, and on slopes spared the worst damage. Plants begin the slow work of rebuilding vertical space. This matters more than it first appears. A forest is not only a collection of trees, it is architecture, it is shade, ladders, food, hiding places, nesting places, scent trails, insects, fruit, flowers, leaves, and small roots through air. When forests return, life gains height again. For mammals, height changes everything. On the open ground, survival may depend on burrows, speed, scent, and secrecy. In the trees, the rules become more delicate. A branch is a path, but also a hazard. A fruiting limb is a meal, but also a test of balance. An insect beneath bark is food for an animal able to grip, climb, and search with precision. The recovering Paleocene world rewards mammals that can move through complexity. Not all mammals take this route. Many remain ground dwellers, diggers, swimmers, or runners. But among the many experiments unfolding after the extinction, one quiet line begins to matter for the distant story of primate small animals exploring the forest edge, the trunk, the branch, and the canopy. No ape exists here, no monkey, no lemur in the modern sense. The world is still tens of millions of years away from the bodies that will later seem recognizable. But the ingredients of a primate-like life are beginning to gather in scattered form. Tree climbing favors hands and feet that can hold rather than merely press. It favors mobile joints, flexible backs, careful balance, and an awareness of three-dimensional space. It favors eyes that judge distance, because a missed branch is not a small mistake. It favors curiosity, memory, and attention, because food in a forest is patchy. Fruit ripens in one place and vanishes in another. Insects hide in crevices. A successful animal must remember where things were, notice when they change, and move through a living maze. One of the surprising details of early primate origins is that teeth often speak before hands do. Fossils of tiny jaws and molars can suggest relationships long before a complete skeleton appears. In early relatives of primates, paleontologists examine the shape of cusps, the size of chewing surfaces, and the wear left by food. A tooth can hint at fruit, insects, or a mixed diet. It can show whether an animal cuts, crushes, pierces, or grinds. From such small remains, scientists infer how certain mammals lived in the newly recovering forests. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate where some early forms belong. But the broad direction is clear enough after the dinosaurs disappear. Some mammals move toward a life increasingly tied to trees and fine-scale feeding. In this world, the forest is both refuge and engine. It shelters small animals from many ground-based threats, but it also forces bodies to become more controlled. A mammal that climbs badly does not leave many descendants in a canopy. Grasping becomes valuable, not as a grand evolutionary plan, but as a simple matter of reaching and holding. A longer finger, a more mobile ankle, a better sense of branch distance, a slightly improved ability to rotate a limb, each small feature can matter. Natural selection does not need to foresee primates. It only needs to favour the animal that reaches the next fruit, clings through the night, or moves safely between feeding sites. The return of flowering plants adds another layer. Angiosperms had already transformed many Cretaceous ecosystems before the impact, and after recovery they continue reshaping forests. Flowers bring insects. Fruits bring animals that eat and spread seeds, nectar, and soft plant parts create changing resources through the year. For small mammals, this is a world of opportunity, but not simplicity. Food is distributed unevenly in time and space. An animal that can learn, remember, smell, see, and manipulate gains an advantage. This does not mean the first primate relatives are suddenly intelligent in a human-like sense. It means the forest rewards a particular kind of alertness, sensory, spatial, and behavioral flexibility. The climate of the early Cenozoic helps these experiments expand. In many intervals after the extinction, Earth is warm, and forests reach into latitudes where they would not grow in the same way today. There are no polar ice caps like the later world will know. Crocodilian relatives live far north. Broadleaf forests spread across regions now associated with cold. This greenhouse planet offers wide corridors of vegetation, and corridors allow animals to move, divide, and diversify. Yet the fossil record is patchy, especially for tiny forest mammals whose bones are easily destroyed. What survives in the record suggests movement and expansion, but the map is incomplete, like a damaged manuscript with some of the most important lines missing. Among the names that appear near the beginning of this primate-adjacent story is Purgatorius, a small mammal known mostly from teeth and jaw fragments. It is not an ape, not a monkey, and not something that should be imagined as a tiny human ancestor waiting in the branches. It is better understood as one of the earliest known relatives near the base of the primate line, part of a wider and still debated cluster of animals close to the origins of primates. Its fossils appear very soon after the KPG extinction, within a world still recovering from the loss of the dinosaurs. That timing is what makes it so powerful for this story. It shows that the roots of the primate experiment reach back almost to the first dawn after catastrophe. Recent discoveries have widened the known geography of Purgatorius and its relatives, reminding researchers that early primate history may have spread faster and farther than older fossil samples suggested. A small jaw from one region can change a map. A few teeth from another can suggest that a lineage was not a local oddity, but part of a broader early radiation. This is one of the quiet thrills of paleontology. Enormous stories sometimes turn on objects scarcely larger than a fingernail. The work is cautious, comparative, and often uncertain. Yet even with those limits, the implication is striking. Soon after the age of giant dinosaurs ends, tiny mammalian relatives of primates are already moving through the recovering world. Their daily existence would have been nothing like the cinematic drama of the asteroid. It would be a life of surfaces and shadows' claws or grasping digits against bark, whiskers testing narrow spaces, teeth closing on beetles, fruit pulp, seeds, or other small foods. Bodies pausing at the edge of a branch before committing to the next movement. Predators still exist. Weather still matters. A fall can be fatal. But these animals inhabit a world where being small and agile is no longer merely a way to avoid the rulers above them. It is becoming a route into new ecological space. This is how bodies change after forest return. Not in a single leap, and not in a straight line toward apes, but through countless adjustments to living in height, texture, and uncertainty. The branch becomes a selective pressure, fruit becomes a clock, insects become hidden prizes, the eye, the hand, the ankle, the tooth, and the brain begin to answer the canopy in their own slow ways. The vanished dinosaurs leave behind not an empty planet, but a reorganized one, and in that reorganization the first faint outline of the primate story becomes visible, not as destiny, but as possibility. The first primate blueprint does not appear as a complete design. It gathers slowly, feature by feature, across millions of years of forest life. In the beginning, there is no dramatic moment when a creature steps onto a branch and becomes a primate. There is only a population of small mammals living among trunks, vines, leaves, insects, fruiting plants, and shadows. Each generation carrying small variations in teeth, hands, feet, eyes, balance, and behavior. Some variations vanish, some persist, some become useful only because the world around them has changed. What later looks like a blueprint is, at the time, merely survival repeated in the trees. The early Paleocene world has already given mammals space, but the Eocene will give primate evolution something even more powerful: vast, warm forests. As Earth moves deeper into the early Cenozoic, global temperatures remain high, and in some intervals climb higher still. Tropical and subtropical forests stretch across broad regions. Dense canopies cover places that are far cooler today. The planet is humid, green, and restless. In these forests, small mammals do not simply move across flat ground. They move through layers. There is the littered forest floor, the roots, the low branches, the tangled understory, the high canopy, and the narrow pathways between them. Life becomes vertical, and vertical life demands a different body. To understand why primates become what they become, the branch must be taken seriously. A branch is not a road. It bends, it narrows, it splits without warning. It may be wet, smooth, broken, or hidden beneath leaves. For an animal that weighs very little, even a thin stem can be a bridge. But the bridge is alive, unstable, and suspended in air. An early primate-like mammal moving through such a place needs more than speed. It needs controlled movement. It needs the ability to grip, pause, reach, test, and shift weight. The body becomes less like a simple ground-running machine and more like a tool for negotiating uncertainty. This is where hands and feet begin to matter in a new way. In many mammals, claws are excellent for digging, scratching, climbing bark, and gripping rough surfaces. But primates, over time, move toward grasping hands and feet, nails instead of sharp claws on many digits, sensitive pads, and opposable or partially opposable digits in different lineages. These traits do not all appear at once, and not all early primates share them in the same form. The evidence remains incomplete, especially because tiny bones from forest animals are rarely preserved in perfect condition. Still, what survives in the record suggests a gradual shift toward bodies that interact with branches through touch and precision rather than only through clawed attachment. The eye changes the story as much as the hand. Many mammals rely heavily on smell, and early mammals certainly did, but in primates, vision becomes unusually important. The eyes face forward, giving overlapping fields of view and better depth perception. In a canopy, this can be the difference between a confident leap and a fatal mistake. Forward-facing eyes are not unique to primates. Predators such as cats and owls also use binocular vision. But in primates, this visual emphasis becomes tied not only to hunting, but to climbing, judging distances, reaching for fruit, tracking insects, reading movement in leaves, and eventually watching the bodies and signals of other group members. The forest rewards the animal that can measure space before entering it. There has long been debate over what drove this visual transformation most strongly. One classic idea emphasizes life in the trees. Depth perception evolves because branch-to-branch movement requires accurate judgment. Another emphasizes predation on insects. Small prey moving among leaves demands sharp sight and quick coordination. Another points to fruit and flowers colored. Visually distinctive foods may reward animals that can identify ripeness and location. No single explanation fully accounts for every feature, and scholars still debate the balance between these pressures. The more likely answer is layered. Branches, insects, fruit, flowers, predators, and social life all contribute in different ways at different times. Evolution rarely uses one reason when an entire forest is available. Teeth continue to provide some of the clearest clues. Early primates and their close relatives often show adaptations for mixed feeding insects, fruits, soft plant parts, gums, and other foods depending on lineage and habitat. A fruit-rich forest is not a constant buffet. Fruits ripen seasonally, disappear quickly, and may be guarded by height, distance, or competition. Insects are protein-rich but elusive. Gums and plant exudates require persistence and suitable teeth. Leaves are abundant but harder to digest, and many primates will later evolve specialized strategies for them. The earliest primate blueprint is therefore not only about climbing, it is about finding food in a changing three-dimensional world. This is one of the lesser-noticed reasons primate evolution becomes connected to memory. A small forest mammal that feeds on scattered resources benefits from remembering where a tree fruited before, which route through the canopy is safe, where insects gather after rain, and where danger tends to appear. This does not require anything like human thought. It requires a practical intelligence shaped by repetition. The forest is a map that changes every day, and animals that remember its patterns gain an edge. Over long spans of time, such pressures may favor larger relative brain size in some primate lineages, stronger sensory integration, and more flexible behavior. Again, the pattern is not simple or uniform, but the direction is important. Primates become animals of attention. By the Eocene, more recognizable primates appear in the fossil record, including early forms often grouped into lineages related to modern lemurs, lorises, and tarsiers, though their exact relationships can be complex. They are small-bodied, agile, and often adapted for arboreal life. Some have grasping extremities, some show large eyes, suggesting nocturnal habits or visually demanding lifestyles. Their remains appear across multiple continents, including North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, reflecting a warmer world where forests provide corridors now broken by climate and geography. These early primates are not apes, and they are not stepping stones in a simple ladder toward humans. They are successful animals in their own right, radiating through the green architecture of the Eocene. The Eocene forests would have sounded and moved differently from modern forests, but certain rhythms would feel familiar. Insects drone in humid air. Leaves shift under the weight of small bodies. Flowers attract feeding animals. Fruit falls and ferments on the ground. Predators wait in stillness. A primate moving through this world must be cautious, but not passive. It tests a branch with one limb before releasing another. It pauses to listen. It turns its head toward motion. It reaches with a hand shaped not merely to touch, but to know. A grasp is more than a mechanical act. It is information. Texture, pressure, distance, and balance flow into the nervous system with every movement. The blueprint also contains a social possibility, though it should not be exaggerated too early. Many primates become intensely social animals later, with grooming, alliances, group movement, and complex recognition. The roots of that social world may lie partly in the demands of living around other bodies in a canopy, when animals feed in the same trees, compete for the same fruits, avoid the same predators, and follow the same routes. Attention to others becomes useful. But the evidence for early social behavior is difficult to read from fossils alone. Bones can show eyes, teeth, limbs, and skull proportions. They do not easily preserve glances, warnings, grooming, or memory. What survives in the record suggests bodies capable of careful movement and varied feeding, while the deeper social life must be inferred with caution. Still, something profound has happened. After the dinosaurs vanish, mammals survive. As forests return, some mammals climb. As canopies expand, some climbers become more precise, more visual, more flexible, more attentive. The early primate blueprint is not a prophecy of apes, but it is the foundation without which apes cannot later exist. Long before any hominoid hangs beneath a branch with powerful shoulders, long before any ape explores a woodland edge, long before any hominin stands upright on African ground, there are these small forest animals living by balance and perception. Their world is green, warm, dangerous, and full of narrow paths. Their legacy is not written in monuments, but in the quiet architecture of the primate body, the forward gaze, the reaching hand, the remembered route, and the ancient habit of looking carefully before moving into the unknown. The forests that cradle early primates do not belong to the cool, familiar world of the present. They grow beneath a hotter sky, on a planet where warmth reaches far into the north and south, where crocodilian relatives can live in regions that would later become harshly seasonal, and where broadleaf trees spread across lands now associated with frost, snow, and long winters. Earth in the early Cenozoic is not uniformly tropical, and local landscapes vary, but the larger pattern is unmistakable. For long intervals, the planet runs warm, the canopies expand, the green world thickens, and inside that warmth, primates find space to become themselves. This greenhouse Earth is one of the most important characters in the story, though it moves slowly and without intention. There are no great ice sheets locking water at the poles in the way later ages will know. Sea levels, ocean currents, rainfall patterns, and atmospheric carbon dioxide help create a world where forests connect regions that are now separated by climate barriers. The continents are still shifting toward their modern positions, but they have not yet produced the same cold walls, dry interiors, and broken corridors that will later isolate many lineages. For small arboreal mammals, this matters deeply. A forest corridor can be a highway. A warm belt of vegetation can let a lineage spread, split, adapt, and become many. The early primates and their close relatives live inside this expanded architecture. They're not ruling the forest. They are participants in a crowded experiment. Around them move birds, lizards, insects, snakes, early relatives of hoofed mammals, carnivorous mammals, rodents and rodent-like forms, marsupials in some regions, and many extinct groups with no easy modern comparison. The early Cenozoic is full of animals that seem, to modern eyes, like drafts of possibilities the planet later abandoned. The world is mammalian, but not yet modern. This is an easy period to misunderstand because the names of later success can distort the view. We know primates will matter to us, so we are tempted to watch the forest as if it is secretly preparing for apes and humans. But to the Eocene forest itself, primates are only one experiment among many. They compete for fruit, insects, gums, flowers, shelter, and safe routes. They succeed in some places and fail in others. Evolution does not favour them because they are destined for intelligence. It favours them only when their bodies and behaviours meet the demands of a particular habitat better than alternatives. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives suggests primates diversify because the forest offers many small opportunities, not because the future is calling them forward. The canopy is a living puzzle. Food appears in pulses. A tree can be heavy with fruit one week and nearly empty the next. Insects may bloom after rains, gather under bark, or vanish with changing weather. Flowers open at certain times. Gums seep from wounds in trunks. Leaves differ in nutrition, toughness, and toxins. For an animal moving through this system, the landscape is a calendar written in scent, colour, texture, and memory. Early primates that can track these rhythms gain more than food. They gain predictability in a world that otherwise shifts constantly. There is also danger in abundance. A warm forest can support many lives, and many lives create competition. Small mammals may crowd into the same fruiting trees. Birds may reach food first. Insects may defend themselves with stings, hard shells, or camouflage. Snakes and raptorial birds may wait along routes where small bodies pass. Mammalian predators, some belonging to extinct groups with formidable teeth, may patrol the branches or forest floor. A primate does not merely need to find food. It needs to feed while watching, choose routes that reduce exposure, and read the difference between ordinary movement in leaves and the movement that means danger. One lesser-known detail of this warm world is how far north some primates and primate-like mammals once lived. Fossils from high-latitude regions show that the primate story was not always confined to the tropics as we imagine them today. In the Eocene, parts of the Arctic and subarctic world supported forests under a seasonal light regime that would seem strange for tree-living mammals. Months of long daylight, months of extended darkness, but far warmer conditions than today. Exactly how primates, or their relatives, manage such settings is still debated. and not every identification is simple. But the broader point is clear. The early primate world was geographically wider than the modern distribution of many primates would suggest. The heat also carries instability. Greenhouse worlds are not gentle simply because they are warm. High temperatures can intensify rainfall in some places and drought in others. Oceans store and move heat. Storms reshape coasts. Plant communities shift as climates fluctuate. During the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a major warming event around 56 million years ago, carbon entered the atmosphere and oceans on a vast scale, and ecosystems responded. Many mammals changed size, range, or distribution. Some lineages spread into new territories. Others faced stress. For the primate story, it marks a world where warmth may open doors, but those doors lead into competition, migration, and uncertainty. Across this heated planet, early primates become part of continental exchange. Land connections and climate corridors allow mammals to move between regions that later become isolated. North America, Europe, and Asia share faunal links during parts of the early Cenozoic. Africa's role becomes increasingly important as primate evolution continues, though its fossil record for some intervals remains frustratingly sparse. That sparseness matters. It means scientists often reconstruct the story from scattered windows rather than a continuous panorama. A jaw from one basin, an ankle bone from another, a skull from a third, a tooth bed exposed by erosion. These fragments create the outline. The missing spaces leave room for debate. The strange mammal lineages surrounding early primates remind us that evolution is not a ladder, but a crowded branching thicket. Some groups thrive for millions of years and then disappear. Others remain obscure until a fossil discovery reveals that they were once widespread. A few leave descendants that still move through the modern world. Many vanish so completely that their former abundance is known only to specialists. Primates survive this crowded scene not by being superior in every way, but by occupying certain niches: agile arboreal movement, varied diets, visual attention, and behavioral flexibility. These are practical advantages, and in the canopy, practicality is enough. As the warm forests stretch across the planet, the primate body continues to refine its relationship with height. Limbs become better suited to grasping and leaping in some lineages, to careful climbing in others. Eyes enlarge in nocturnal forms. Teeth shift with diet. Brains process increasingly complex sensory maps. Nothing in this world resembles an ape yet, but the old ingredients are being stirred. A planet made warm by deep time climate, a forest made tall by plant recovery and expansion, a mammal made agile by survival among branches. These come together slowly. The great irony is that the same warmth that helps early primates spread will not last forever. Earth will cool. Forests will contract. Continents will continue to drift. Mountain ranges will rise and alter winds and rainfall. The broad green corridors will fracture. Some primate lineages will retreat, others adapt, and others vanish. But for now, in the greenhouse world, the forest holds. Branches cross above shaded ground. Fruit ripens in humid air. Small eyes measure distance. Small hands close around bark and stem. The long road to apes is still unimaginably long, but it is being carried forward through a hot earth full of canopies, where the future hides not in giants, but in the careful movements of animals that weigh almost nothing. The warm forest world does not collapse in a single season. It thins by degrees, in the way deep time usually changes the rules. A little less warmth here, a slightly drier interval there, a coastline altered, an ocean current redirected, a mountain range rising slowly enough that no animal can sense the motion, yet powerfully enough to reshape rain across continents. For millions of years, primates live inside a greenhouse Earth that lets forests stretch across wide distances. Then the planet begins to turn toward a different mood. The canopies do not vanish everywhere, and the tropics remain rich, but the easy corridors of warmth start to narrow. What had once been connected becomes patchy. What had once been broadly green becomes divided by season, distance, and open ground. This cooling is not simple, and it is not constant. Earth's climate pulses, hesitates, warms again, cools again, and shifts in different ways from region to region. Still, the larger Cenozoic trend after the early Eocene warmth is toward a cooler, more structured planet. Carbon dioxide levels decline over long spans. Weathering of rocks draws carbon from the atmosphere. The positions of continents influence oceans and winds. The opening and closing of seaways alter circulation. Antarctica, once tied into warmer systems, becomes increasingly isolated by ocean currents, and eventually ice begins to gather there on a scale that changes the planet. No primate watches this happen, but every primate lineage feels the consequences through food, forest, rainfall, and survival. The effect on primates is profound because primates are so deeply tied to trees. A creature built for branches can cross an unbroken canopy as if moving through a world made for it. But when forests fragment, the same body faces a different landscape. A gap between trees becomes a problem. A dry corridor becomes a barrier. A seasonal woodland may offer fruit only part of the year. A cooler latitude may no longer support the same plant communities. The map of primate life begins to fracture. Some populations remain in refuges where forest persists. Others adapt to changing diets or more seasonal conditions. Others disappear from places where earlier warmth had allowed them to flourish. This is one of the quiet engines of evolution separation. When a forest corridor breaks, populations that once exchanged genes may become isolated. Over time, isolation lets differences accumulate. A group in a wetter forest follows one path. A group in a more seasonal woodland follows another. A group cut off in a basin, on a peninsula, or along a mountain margin may become distinctive in ways no one could have predicted. The fossil record preserves only a fraction of these experiments, and scholars still debate many relationships among early primates, but the logic of fragmentation is clear. Climate does not merely remove habitat, it rearranges ancestry. One lesser-known detail is that primates once lived in parts of North America and Europe, where no native wild primates remain today. During the warm Miocene, those regions could support them. As cooling and seasonality intensified, many of these northern primates vanished. Europe, in particular, became a stage of repeated arrival, isolation, and disappearance. The map of primates that modern people carry in their heads, with monkeys in tropical forests and apes in Africa and Asia, is only the late version of a much older and stranger geography. Fossils remind us that primates once explored a wider world, and climate later erased many of those northern chapters. Food becomes one of the sharpest pressures. In a stable, warm forest, fruit, insects, flowers, and soft plant foods may be available in overlapping waves. In a more seasonal world, abundance comes and goes. Some primates respond by becoming more specialized. Others become more flexible. Teeth change as diets shift. Jaw strength, enamel thickness, digestive strategies, body size, and ranging behavior all become part of the negotiation. A small animal that once fed heavily on soft fruit may need harder seeds, leaves, gums, or insects when preferred foods are scarce. No single explanation fully accounts for every change in every lineage, but the pattern repeats across evolution when climate alters the pantry. Bodies and behaviors must answer. The forest itself changes character. Dense humid canopy gives way in some regions to more open woodland, gallery forest along rivers, patchy evergreen refuges, or seasonal broadleaf systems. The space between food sources grows. Movement becomes more demanding. An animal that can leap well may benefit where trees are spaced but still reachable. An animal that climbs carefully may survive in tangled refuges. An animal that can descend briefly to the ground without losing all safety may cross gaps that others cannot. Such movements do not yet make apes, but they begin teaching primate bodies that the world is not always continuous green. The future will belong not only to those that cling to forests, but also to those that can manage their edges. New competitors and predators add pressure. Hoofed mammals diversify. Carnivorous mammals become more specialized. Rodents expand. Birds, snakes, and other hunters continue to shape small primate life from above. Below, and within the branches, a fruiting tree can attract many mouths, and a shrinking forest can compress animals into the same remaining habitat. What survives in the record suggests that primate success depends increasingly on versatility. But versatility has limits. Some branches of the primate tree end here, quietly, without descendants. Yet extinction is not the only outcome of climate change. In some places, pressure produces innovation. Early anthropoids, the broader group that will eventually include monkeys, apes, and humans, become increasingly important after earlier primate radiations. Their origins remain debated in detail, with evidence from Asia and Africa both playing important roles. The exact routes and timing are still being refined as new fossils appear, but by the later Eocene and Oligocene, anthropoids are part of the story in a much clearer way. The road toward monkeys and apes is still long, but the older primate world is beginning to give way to new forms. The transition into the Oligocene, around 34 million years ago, marks one of the great climatic thresholds. Global cooling intensifies, Antarctic glaciation expands, and ecosystems reorganize. Many species vanish, others move or adapt. In primate history, this boundary matters because it helps reshape where primates can live and which lineages continue. North America loses its native primates. Europe's primate history becomes unstable and episodic. Africa and Asia become increasingly important in the unfolding anthropoid story. Though the record is uneven, the evidence remains incomplete, but the pattern is one of pruning and redirection. The primate tree is not simply growing more branches, it is also losing many. So the story that began in ash now enters a slower tension. The planet that once opened canopies for early primates begins to close some of them. The warm roots narrow. The northern forests lose their primate shadows. Surviving lineages gather in regions where climate, vegetation, and chance still allow them to continue. In the broken map of cooling Earth, the future is being sorted. Some paths end in fossil teeth and forgotten bones. Some paths lead toward monkeys. Some, much later, lead toward apes. And in that gradual turning of climate, the long road from dinosaurs to hominoids becomes less like a straight path and more like a series of doors, most of them closing, a few of them opening just wide enough for life to pass through. The cooling world does not stop primate evolution, it edits it. After the warm corridors narrow and many northern primate stories fade, the surviving branches continue in a world that is more divided, more seasonal, and more demanding. The great early spread of primates has been pruned, but pruning can make the remaining lines more distinct. Out of this long reshaping come the deeper divisions that matter for everything. Later, the split between the primates that will lead toward lemurs and lorises, the lineage of tarsiers and the anthropoids, the broad group that will eventually include monkeys, apes, and humans. The names are modern, but the separations are ancient, and they remind us that the road to apes is not a direct road at all. It is a branching forest of ancestry, with most branches ending before the present ever arrives. Anthropoids are not simply better primates. They are primates shaped by particular combinations of skull, teeth, vision, brain, body size, and behavior. Compared with many earlier primate forms, they tend to show a stronger emphasis on forward-facing vision. Changes in the bony protection around the eyes, and dental patterns suited to varied diets. Their brains, relative to body size, become important in ways that will continue through later primate evolution, but the details of their origins are still debated. Fossils from Asia and Africa have both played major roles in the argument, and new discoveries can shift the picture. What survives in the record suggests that anthropoids were already diversifying by the later Eocene and Oligocene, but the exact geography of their earliest rise remains a puzzle built from scattered jaws, skulls, teeth, and ankle bones. One place becomes especially important in the story Africa. Not because Africa is the only stage on which primate evolution matters, but because it preserves key chapters in the ancestry of monkeys and apes. In the Fayum Depression of Egypt, fossil beds reveal a world from around the late Eocene and Oligocene, when northern Africa held forests, wetlands, rivers, and coastal environments very different from the desert landscape seen there today. The Fayum fossils include early anthropoids that help illuminate the deep background of monkeys and apes. They are not apes themselves. They are older relatives near the roots of the broader group, yet they show that Africa is becoming a crucial archive of primate change. These Fayum primates lived among crocodilians, early elephants, hyracoids, strange carnivorous mammals, birds, turtles, and many extinct animals whose worlds have vanished beneath sand and stone. Their environment was not a simple jungle. It was a mosaic of waterways, forests, and changing habitats near ancient coastlines. Such mosaics matter because they offer different foods and movement challenges. A primate might feed in trees, travel along riverine corridors, retreat into denser vegetation, or face seasonal shifts in available fruit and leaves. The body that succeeds here must be capable, observant, and adaptable. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise of anthropoids, but environmental variety likely plays a major role. The next great division is between the lineages that will lead to New World monkeys and those that remain in Africa and Eurasia, eventually giving rise to Old World monkeys and apes. The story of New World monkeys contains one of the stranger episodes in primate history. Their ancestors somehow reached South America from Africa, most likely by rafting across the Atlantic on floating mats of vegetation during a time when the ocean was narrower than today, and currents may have helped carry storm-torn debris westward. This sounds almost like folklore, but it is a mainstream explanation because the alternatives are even more difficult. There was no simple land bridge connecting Africa and South America for primates at that time. The evidence remains incomplete, but genetic, fossil, and geological reasoning all point toward an extraordinary overwater dispersal by small ancestral monkeys. Evolution sometimes turns on events so unlikely that they seem absurd, and yet the living forests of South America are filled with the descendants of one such improbable crossing. The lineage that stays in the Old World continues along another path. Over millions of years, Old World monkeys and apes separate from one another. This split is not a neat moment in which one animal gives birth to a monkey and another to an ape. It is a gradual divergence between populations whose descendants will become increasingly different. Old World monkeys tend to develop tails, more specialized running and leaping abilities in many forms, and teeth, with a pattern especially suited to shearing and processing a wide range of foods. Apes, by contrast, eventually lose the tail and develop bodies that emphasize shoulder mobility, powerful grasping, flexible postures, and a different relationship with branches. These differences will become more obvious later, but their roots lie in this ancient separation. The loss of the tail is one of the most visible ape traits, but it should not be treated as a simple upgrade. A tail is useful. For many monkeys, it aids balance, movement, and communication. In some New World monkeys, it becomes prehensile, almost like a fifth limb. Apes lose it because their bodies move differently and their balance systems evolve under different demands. A tailless body can sit upright more easily, hang below branches, climb with powerful arms, and shift weight in ways that suit larger-bodied arboreal life. But it also gives up certain advantages. Evolution is never a clean ladder of improvement. It is trade-off after trade-off, written into bone. The ape body, as it gradually emerges, is built around versatility and posture. The shoulders become more mobile, the arms can reach widely, the trunk can hold itself differently, the hands become powerful tools of suspension, climbing, and manipulation. The spine and pelvis will later become central to the hominin story. But even before that, apes show a distinctive departure from many monkey-like patterns. They are not simply monkeys without tails. They are animals experimenting with a different way of occupying trees and, eventually, the ground. Diet also matters. Early apes and their close relatives likely feed on fruits, leaves, seeds, and other plant foods in varying proportions, with some animal foods depending on opportunity and lineage. Teeth and jaw fragments again become essential witnesses. Thick enamel in some later apes may suggest harder or more abrasive foods, while thinner enamel in others may point toward different feeding strategies. The details vary, and scholars still debate the diets of many fossil apes because teeth preserve clues rather than complete menus. Still, diet ties the ape story to forest structure. A fruit-rich canopy rewards memory and movement. A more seasonal woodland rewards flexibility and stronger chewing. Changing environments push bodies in different directions. The split between monkeys and apes is also a story of competition. Old World monkeys become extraordinarily successful. They diversify across Africa and Eurasia, adapting to forests, woodlands, savannas, cliffs, and cities in the much later world. Their success may eventually place pressure on some ape lineages, especially where diets and habitats overlap. But early on, both groups are exploring possibilities. Monkeys become fast, varied, and often socially complex. Apes become fewer in living species today, but their extinct diversity was once much greater than modern forests suggest. This is the hidden contradiction in the modern view of apes. Today, apes seem rare and vulnerable gibbons in Asian forests, orangutans in Southeast Asia, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans as the surviving members of a once broader story. but the fossil record shows that apes were once far more diverse. They lived across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Some were small, some were large. Some moved in ways unlike any living ape. Some inhabited forests. Others used more open or seasonal habitats. The living apes are not the whole picture. They are the last visible tips of a much larger vanished radiation. By the time the true ape story begins to come into focus, tens of millions of years have passed since the asteroid darkened the Cretaceous sky. The connection remains real, but it is long and indirect. Dinosaurs disappeared, mammals expanded, primate relatives entered the trees, anthropoids emerged from the changing forest world. Monkeys and apes separated along deep evolutionary lines. Each step depends on what came before, yet none was guaranteed. The road to apes is not a straight corridor from catastrophe to human ancestry. It is a path repeatedly narrowed by climate, widened by opportunity, broken by extinction, and redirected by chance. And now, after all that slow preparation, the scene is ready for the Miocene, when apes finally begin to flourish in forms that make the word ape belong to the story in earnest. By the Miocene, the word ape finally begins to belong to the story in a clearer way. The asteroid is now almost unimaginably distant, buried beneath 40 million years of recovery, cooling, warming pulses, forest expansions, extinctions, migrations, and evolutionary experiments. The tiny mammals that once survived in the ash have become entire worlds of hoofed animals, carnivores, rodents, bats, elephants, whales, monkeys, and many vanished forms that leave no living descendants. Primates have already passed through their first great ages of forest life. Anthropoids have emerged. Monkeys and apes have begun to part ways. And in Africa, during the early Miocene, the hominoids start to diversify with a richness that the modern world no longer reveals. This is not yet the age of humans. It is not even the age of human ancestors in the strict sense. It is the age of ape experiments, bodies trying different solutions to trees, branches, food, posture, and changing habitats. The apes of this time are not simply earlier versions of chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, or people. Many belong to extinct branches with their own combinations of traits. Some are small compared with living great apes. Some may have moved above branches rather than hanging beneath them. Some show teeth that suggest fruit-heavy diets, while others hint at tougher or more varied foods. The evidence remains incomplete, often made of jaws, teeth, partial limbs, and fragmentary skulls. But the pattern is unmistakable. For a time, apes are far more diverse than they are today. Africa's landscapes during the early Miocene are also more varied than a simple picture of endless rainforest would suggest. Forests certainly matter, and many early apes depend on them, but the continent is not one continuous green blanket. There are riverine forests, woodland margins, seasonal habitats, lake basins, coastal zones, and areas where vegetation shifts with rainfall and geological change. Rift systems open and reshape drainage. Volcanic landscapes preserve fossils in some places while destroying evidence in others. Lakes appear and vanish. Rivers cut through sediment. The stage on which apes evolve is dynamic, and that dynamism may be one reason so many forms appear. The older primate inheritance still matters. Apes are primates of grasping hands, careful vision, flexible behavior, and tree-shaped bodies. But they begin to push those traits in distinctive directions. Compared with many monkeys, apes tend toward greater shoulder mobility and more flexible postures. Their bodies are less committed to running along branches on all fours in the monkey pattern, and more open to climbing, reaching, suspending, and shifting weight in multiple ways. The loss of the tail is part of this, but not the whole story. A tailless ape must solve balance through trunk control, limb placement, grip, and posture. That constraint becomes an opportunity. The body becomes a versatile instrument in a complex vertical world. One of the important surprises from early Miocene research is that ape environments were not always the dense closed forests once assumed. Sites such as Moroto in Uganda, around 21 million years old, have helped complicate the picture. Fossil evidence from that region has been interpreted to suggest that early hominoids may have lived in more open woodland conditions than older models expected. While still showing locomotor traits linked to ape-like versatility, scholars still debate details of habitat reconstruction and behavior, because ancient environments rarely preserve themselves with perfect clarity. But the broader message is powerful. The evolution of apes may have unfolded not only in deep forests, but also in landscapes where trees, gaps, seasonal resources, and ground surfaces formed a more mixed world. That matters because mixed habitats ask difficult questions of a body. In a closed canopy, an arboreal animal may travel through branches with limited need to descend. In more open woodland, the distance between feeding sites can increase. Trees may still provide food and refuge, but they do not always connect. An ape living in such a setting may climb to feed, descend to cross, sit upright to handle food, reach above its head, and move through uneven terrain. It is not yet a bipedal hominin. It is not walking like a human, but it is living in a world where posture matters, where flexibility is valuable, and where the old primate relationship with trees begins to meet the demands of edges and openings. Teeth again carry much of the testimony. Early apes leave behind molars and jaws that reveal diet in partial hints. Fruit is important for many, but fruit alone may not explain every form. Some apes develop dental traits that suggest tougher foods, harder objects, or more seasonal fallback diets. In a world where forests change and resources fluctuate, the ability to shift foods can be decisive. A fruit specialist may thrive in abundance and struggle in scarcity. A more flexible feeder may survive leaner periods. No single explanation fully accounts for the diversity of Miocene apes, but diet, habitat, body size, and locomotion are clearly intertwined. Among the newer fossil names that helps illuminate this world is Masropithecus mogurensis, an early Miocene ape from Egypt, dated to roughly 17 to 18 million years ago. Its importance lies not in being a direct ancestor of humans, but in occupying a biogeographic crossroads between Africa and Eurasia. Egypt at that time is not the desert monument landscape of later imagination. It is part of a shifting northern African world near roots that may have mattered for a movement between continents. A fossil ape there reminds us that hominoid evolution is not confined to a single valley or forest. It unfolds across changing corridors, shorelines, and ecological thresholds where Africa and Eurasia begin to exchange more animals. Such fossils are especially valuable because the early ape record has gaps large enough to distort the story. Living apes are too few to serve as a complete guide. Chimpanzees and gorillas, for example, are not unchanged models of the Miocene past. Orangutans and gibbons preserve their own long histories, not a general ancestral ape condition. Humans, too, are a highly specialized surviving branch, not the purpose toward which all apes were moving. Fossils like those from Moroto and Mogura help restore a lost diversity, showing that early apes experimented with combinations of anatomy and habitat not found in any living species. There is a quiet drama in this. Modern people often look at apes and see either kinship or disappearance, the intelligence of chimpanzees. the strength of gorillas, the solitude of orangutans, the speed and song of gibbons, and the vulnerability that surrounds them all. But in the Miocene, apes are not a small endangered remnant. They are expanding, splitting, testing landscapes. Some lineages will later spread into Eurasia, some will vanish in Africa, some will contribute indirectly to the deeper ancestry from which hominins eventually arise. Many will disappear without leaving living descendants, their bodies known only from broken teeth in museum drawers and sediment beds. The ape experiments of Africa also remind us how far the story has travelled from the death of the dinosaurs. The connection is not immediate, but it is continuous. The asteroid opens ecological space for mammals. Mammals diversify. Primates adapt to forests. Anthropoids survive climatic pruning. Apes emerge from one branch of that long primate history and begin exploring a changing Miocene continent. The title may say that when dinosaurs disappeared, ape evolution began. But the more truthful version is more haunting when dinosaurs disappeared. The first distant conditions were created for a chain of events so long that apes would not appear until the world had reinvented itself many times. In the early Miocene forests and woodlands, the future remains hidden. No creature there is trying to become human. No ape knows it belongs to a lineage that will one day be studied by another ape with tools, language, and museums. They climb, feed, rest, travel, compete, and adapt within the immediate demands of their world. Yet in their shoulders, teeth, hands, and changing habitats, the next great tension is forming. Some apes will remain deeply tied to trees, some will face more open ground, some will spread beyond Africa, some will vanish as climates shift again. The long road now approaches a threshold where the forest no longer holds every answer. The forest does not disappear, but it stops being everywhere. That is the important change. After the early Miocene world of expanding ape experiments, the landscapes many apes inhabit become more uneven, more seasonal, and more broken by gaps. Trees still stand along rivers, in valleys, on slopes, around lakes, and in humid pockets where rainfall remains generous. Fruit still ripens, branches still offer safety and food. But between one patch of trees and another, the ground begins to matter in a way it did not matter inside continuous canopy. For some ape relatives, the earth below is no longer only a place to avoid. It becomes a corridor, a feeding surface, a risk, and eventually one of the great stages of evolution. This shift should not be imagined as a sudden march out of the trees onto open savanna. That older image is too clean and too simple. The Miocene and later African landscapes are mosaics: woodland, forest edge, gallery forest, bushland, wetland, lake shore, and open patches mixed in shifting proportions. Grass is spread in some places, but the great expansion of certain grass-dominated ecosystems comes later and varies by region. What survives in the record suggests that early apes and their relatives often lived in habitats where trees and ground were both important. The ground becomes tempting not because the forest fails completely, but because the forest becomes interrupted. For an ape, interruption is a serious problem. A monkey with a long balancing tail may run along branches differently, leap between smaller supports, or use speed and agility in ways a larger ape cannot. An ape carries a heavier tailless body. Its shoulders are mobile, its arms strong, its trunk flexible. But those same traits come with trade-offs. Large apes cannot always use the thinnest branches. They may feed at the ends of boughs with caution, climb vertically, hang, sit, or reach. When trees stand apart, Descending may be less costly than forcing a dangerous route through the canopy. The ground is risky, but sometimes the risky path is the only efficient path. This is where posture becomes more than a detail. Apes are often described as orthograde animals, meaning their trunks can be held more upright than the more horizontal backs typical of many quadrupedal mammals. This does not mean they are human-like walkers. It means their bodies are built for sitting upright, climbing with the torso vertical, reaching above and around, hanging below branches, and shifting weight through flexible shoulders and hips. Long before habitual human bipedalism appears, upright posture already has uses in trees. A body can be vertical while climbing. It can be vertical while feeding. It can be vertical while balancing on a large branch and reaching for fruit. One surprising implication is that the roots of uprightness may not begin on open plains, but in the complex postures of arboreal apes. Scholars still debate how much the earliest hominin bipedalism inherited from climbing apes, how much came from life on the ground, and how much emerged from a mosaic of both. The evidence remains incomplete because locomotion is difficult to reconstruct from fragments. A femur, a pelvis, a foot bone, a shoulder blade, or a vertebra can speak, but rarely in a complete sentence. Even when a fossil preserves anatomy beautifully, behavior must be inferred. Bones reveal what movements were possible and likely. They do not preserve every hour of an animal's day. This uncertainty is not a weakness in the story. It is the honest shape of deep time. The ground changes the meaning of food. In a patchy environment, fruiting trees may be separated by distance. Fallen fruit may gather below branches. Tubers, seeds, insects, leaves, and other resources may be available near or on the ground. A primate that can descend briefly and move safely between feeding places expands its options. But every descent brings exposure. Predators have easier lines of approach on the ground. Visibility changes. Escape routes are different. A branch can be grabbed. Open earth offers fewer immediate handles. For a large ape, ground travel requires strength, judgment, and perhaps group awareness. Though the social details of extinct apes are difficult to know, there is a lesser-known caution here: spending time on the ground does not automatically lead to walking on two legs. Many primates use the ground without becoming bipedal. Baboons, macaques, and many other monkeys are skilled terrestrial quadrupeds. Modern African apes move on the ground largely by knuckle walking, but whether knuckle walking was present in the common ancestor of humans and African apes remains debated. Some researchers see it as ancient. Others argue that chimpanzees and gorillas may have evolved their knuckle-walking specializations independently, or in ways not directly ancestral to humans. No single explanation fully accounts for all the anatomy, and the fossil record continues to complicate simple answers. What can be said more safely is that changing habitats increase the value of locomotor versatility. An ape that can climb, sit, reach, descend, cross, and climb again has more ways to use a broken landscape. Versatility does not guarantee survival, but it gives evolution more material to work with. In woodland mosaics, a body built only for one narrow route may struggle when the route vanishes. A body capable of several imperfect solutions may continue. This is a recurring theme since the asteroid survival favors not always the strongest design, but the design that can keep functioning when the world changes. The Miocene offers many ape forms that seem to test these possibilities. Some are known mostly from teeth and jaws, leaving their locomotion uncertain. Others preserve limb bones that hint at climbing, above-branch movement, suspension, or more terrestrial habits. Europe and Asia also become important as apes disperse beyond Africa during warmer intervals and through changing land connections. In those regions, ape lineages diversify and later face climatic pressures of their own. Some European apes appear in forested or woodland habitats, unlike the dense tropical homes of living great apes. Their existence is a reminder that ape evolution was once geographically broad and anatomically varied, not confined to the few surviving forms we know today. As environments open and fragment, body size becomes another pressure. Larger animals can travel farther and may process different foods, but they need more calories. They can reach fruit others cannot, but they may struggle on smaller supports. Among apes, increasing size may encourage more time on large branches and the ground, while also making continuous canopy travel less practical. Again, the pattern is not universal. Different lineages solve the problem differently. Some vanish, some retreat with forests, some adapt to seasonal resources. Evolution is a set of compromises, and the Miocene is full of them. The future of hominins is not yet here, but its conditions are gathering. Upright posture, flexible limbs, tree and ground movement, seasonal foods, environmental patchiness, and the need to travel between resources all become part of the background from which later bipedal ancestors will emerge. The ground is not a destiny, and it is not a simple invitation. It is dangerous, useful, and unavoidable in changing measure. For some ape relatives, it becomes a place crossed quickly. For others, a place used more often. For one later branch, it will become central. But at this point in the story, the most important change is quieter. The ancient primate body, shaped for branches since the world recovered from fire and ash, is beginning to learn that the spaces between trees can shape evolution just as powerfully as the trees themselves. The ground has been waiting in the story for a long time, but it has not become the center all at once. Long before any recognizable human walks across a plain with tools in hand, there are apes living near the margins of forests, woodlands, lakes, and river corridors, carrying bodies shaped by climbing and feeding among trees. Some of those apes leave no descendants. Some belong to branches that will one day lead to chimpanzees and gorillas. One branch, difficult to follow and broken in the fossil record, begins to move towards something else. It is not yet human. It is not even close to human in mind, culture, or appearance, but it belongs to the hominin line, the lineage closer to humans than to living chimpanzees and bonobos after the split from their last common ancestor. That split is one of the great thresholds in deep human history, but it is not visible as a clean line in the rocks. The last common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees has not been found as a complete fossil animal standing conveniently at the fork. Instead, scientists work around the missing center, comparing living apes, ancient bones, genetics, geology, and anatomy. Estimates often place the divergence somewhere around 8 to 6 million years ago, though the exact timing remains debated. The evidence remains incomplete, and the earliest fossils near this boundary are fragmentary enough that their identities are still argued over. Yet from those fragments, a new pattern begins to emerge. Some apes are experimenting more deeply with upright movement. One of the oldest names in this shadowy zone is Sahelanthropus chadensis, known from fossils found in Chad and dated to around 7 million years ago. Its skull has a small brain case by later human standards, but certain features, especially the position of the opening where the spinal cord passes beneath the skull, have been interpreted by some researchers as evidence that it may have held its head in a way consistent with bipedal posture. Others are more cautious, arguing that the anatomy is difficult to interpret and that more complete postcranial remains are needed to understand how it moved. This is the texture of early hominin research. A skull can suggest a possibility, but a possibility is not the same as a walking body. Then comes Aurorin from Kenya, around 6 million years old, known from fragmentary remains including parts of the thigh bone. Some features of the femur have been read as signs of bipedal locomotion, while other aspects indicate strong climbing ability. The combination is important. Early hominins were not simply forest apes who abandoned the trees overnight. They were likely mixed movers, animals whose bodies still remembered branches while beginning to use the ground in new ways. The old story of humans rising when forests vanished and savanna forced them upright is too crude. Bipedalism seems to have emerged in landscapes where trees remained part of life. The ground did not replace the forest. It entered into partnership with it. Ardipithecus ramidus, from Ethiopia and dating to around 4.4 million years ago, gives this idea a more detailed body. Ardipithecus is not an ape in the modern chimpanzee pattern, and it is not human-like in the later Australopithecus sense. Its anatomy is a mosaic. The pelvis suggests some capacity for upright walking. The foot retains a grasping big toe useful for climbing. The hands do not show the same knuckle-walking specialization seen in modern African apes. Its teeth, especially the reduced canine size compared with many apes, have been used to explore social and dietary possibilities, though such interpretations require caution. What survives in the record suggests an animal moving through both trees and ground, not a creature fully committed to either world. This mosaic is one of the most surprising and important details in the hominin story. Evolution does not build humans by simply taking a chimpanzee-like animal and straightening its back. Chimpanzees and gorillas have their own specialized histories. The last common ancestor may not have looked exactly like any living ape. Early hominins may have evolved from animals already different from modern knuckle-walking apes in posture, hands, and movement. That realization changes the question. Instead of asking why a chimpanzee became human, the better question is how one extinct ape lineage, already adapted to a complex mixture of climbing and upright posture, shifted further into habitual bipedalism over millions of years. Bipedalism itself is not a single trait, it is a whole body arrangement. The skull balances differently on the spine curves, the pelvis shortens and broadens, the femur angles inward toward the knee, ankle, foot arch, toes, and heel all participate. The muscles and ligaments must absorb weight in new ways. Walking on two legs frees the hands, but it also creates slower sprinting compared with many quadrupeds. Difficult childbirth later in human evolution, and heavy demands on joints. No single explanation fully accounts for why bipedalism became so central. It may have helped with moving between trees, carrying food, reaching, feeding upright in branches, reducing sun exposure in open settings, traveling efficiently over distance, or some combination of these pressures. The likely answer is not one cause, but a changing mixture across time and habitat. By around 4 to 3 million years ago, Australopithecus enters the story more clearly. These hominins are still small-brained compared with later humans, and many retain strong climbing-related features, but their bipedalism is much more evident. Australopithecus afarensis, known from East Africa, has become famous partly because of a remarkably preserved skeleton nicknamed Lucy, but the broader evidence is even richer. Limb bones, pelvis fragments, foot anatomy. and the Letoli footprints in Tanzania together show that some hominins were walking upright long before large brains or advanced stone tool cultures appeared. The footprints are especially haunting, not a monument, not a tool, not a burial, but a trail pressed into volcanic ash and preserved by chance. They show movement, weight, direction, and presence. For once, deep time preserves not just a body, but a moment of passage. Yet even with Australopithecus, the story resists simplicity. These hominins likely climbed as well as walked. Their shoulders, arms, hands, and curved fingers in some species suggest that trees remained useful, perhaps for feeding, resting, or safety. Their teeth indicate varied diets, including fruits, leaves, seeds, roots, or harder fallback foods depending on species and environment. Chemical traces in tooth enamel later reveal that some hominins consumed foods from more open habitats, including grasses or animals that fed on grasses, but the exact menu varies across populations and time. Diet is a landscape written into teeth, and the landscape was never one thing. Tool use also begins as a blur rather than a sudden invention. Stone tools are clearly associated with later hominins and become central to the story of Homo. But possible cut marks and very old stone artifacts have pushed debates about tool use deeper than once expected. Whether all early claims reflect hominin behavior remains debated, and caution is essential. But the larger point is that hands were free before brains became large. Bipedalism appears before the technological explosion. The body changes first, the hand is released from constant locomotion, and only much later does it become the maker of worlds. The earliest hominin line therefore takes shape as a puzzle of partial answers. Upright walking begins before large brains. Tree use continues after ground travel increases. Diet shifts without becoming uniform. Tool use emerges gradually and unevenly. Identity itself remains difficult, because fossils near the root of the human line do not carry labels. A jaw, a femur, a skull base, a tooth row each offers evidence, but also ambiguity. Scholars still debate which fossils belong securely on the human side of the split, which represent close relatives, and which may sit near branches that later vanished. And this uncertainty gives the story its depth. The rise of hominins is not a clean triumph over other apes. It is one more experiment in a long chain that began when mammals survived a darkened earth. The branch that leads toward humans is narrow, fragile, and often poorly lit. It passes through forests, woodland edges, ash beds, lake margins, and broken fossil horizons. It carries the ancient primate inheritance of grasping, seeing, remembering, and moving carefully through complexity. But now that inheritance is changing again. The hands are becoming less tied to the ground, the feet are taking on more of the burden, the head is carried above the spine, the world ahead is still uncertain. But the body has turned toward a new way of moving through it. Once the feet carry more of the body's future, the hands begin to change the meaning of survival. This is not immediate, and it is not magical. For a long time, early hominins walk upright with brains still small by later human standards, moving through African landscapes as animals among animals, shaped by food, weather, predators, water, and the need to remember where life can continue. But the old primate inheritance has been rearranged. The hand that once helped carry weight through branches can now spend more time reaching, gathering, breaking, holding, carrying, and eventually striking stone against stone. The body has opened a possibility. The mind will take much longer to fill it. The first stone tools do not look impressive at a glance. They are not polished blades, spears, carvings, or monuments. They are sharp flakes, battered cores, cutting edges made by hitting one stone with another. To modern eyes, they can seem almost too simple to matter. But simplicity is deceptive. A flake with a sharp edge changes what an animal can do with the world. It can cut hide, slice plant material, scrape, chop, crack, and open resources that teeth and nails alone cannot easily manage. A stone edge is a portable tooth, one made outside the body. That is a profound shift. Evolution no longer works only through bone and muscle. It begins, in a small way, to work through objects. The earliest widely recognized stone tool traditions, often associated with the older one, appear by around 2.6 million years ago, though older claims and possible earlier tool use remain part of ongoing debate. Some evidence suggests that tool-making may extend deeper than once believed, but scholars still debate which artifacts were made by hominins, which species made them, and how regularly they were used. The evidence remains incomplete because stone survives far better than wood, fibre, skin, or behaviour. A landscape may preserve the hardest tools and erase the softer technologies that could have mattered just as much. What survives in the record suggests that by the time Homo enters the story, technology is becoming part of adaptation in a more dependable way. The genus Homo does not arrive as a single clean replacement for Australopithecus. Early Homo is messy, debated, and fragmentary, with species names and boundaries that specialists continue to argue over. Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, and early Homo erectus or Homo augusta are part of a complex African picture in which brain size increases, teeth and faces shift, bodies change, and tool use becomes more visible. But there is no sudden moment when an ape-like creature becomes recognizably human. Instead, different traits appear at different speeds: larger brains, smaller teeth, longer legs, changing hands, altered diets, and expanding ranges form a mosaic. Evolution is still not writing a straight line. Brain expansion is one of the most dramatic changes, but it is also one of the most expensive. Brain tissue demands energy. A larger brain must be fed, cooled, protected, and supported by a body capable of finding enough calories. This makes diet central to the rise of Homo. Meat, marrow, tubers, fruits, seeds, insects, and other foods all likely matter in different times and places. Stone tools help open carcasses and crack bones for marrow, a rich resource that many predators cannot fully access once the first feeding is over. Whether early Homo hunted regularly, scavenged often, or used a mixture of both remains debated, and the answer almost certainly varies across environments. No single explanation fully accounts for the shift, but tools allow hominins to enter food webs in a new way. There is a surprising quietness to this change. The early toolmaker is not yet a master of nature. It is still vulnerable. It must watch larger carnivores, read the movements of scavengers, know when to approach and when to leave, and coordinate with others well enough to reduce danger. A stone flake does not make a hominin powerful in the way a lion is powerful. It makes the hominin opportunistic with sharper edges. It turns patience, attention, memory, and cooperation into survival tools. This is an older primate skill transformed. The same attentiveness once used to navigate fruiting trees now helps read open landscapes, animal trails, water sources, and the behavior of other species. Carrying becomes important as well. A bipedal body can move with food or tools in the hands. This seems ordinary now, But in evolutionary terms, it changes options. A useful stone can be taken from one place to another. Food can be gathered and transported. A resource found in one location can be used elsewhere. This may encourage sharing, planning, and repeated use of favoured places, though the details are difficult to prove. Bones and stones can show cut marks, tool edges, and concentrations of activity. They cannot easily show motives. Still, what survives in the record suggests that hominins are beginning to organize behavior around places, materials, and repeated actions in ways more complex than simple feeding. Fire enters the story like a flicker seen through fog. Later, humans will depend on it so deeply that it becomes almost impossible to imagine human life without it. Warmth, light, cooking, protection, landscape management, and social gathering all become tied to flame. But the earliest control of fire is difficult to prove. Natural fires are common in many environments, and burned bones or sediments do not always mean deliberate use. Stronger evidence for habitual fire use appears later. While earlier claims remain debated, the evidence remains incomplete, and caution matters. Yet even the gradual approach to fire changes the edge of the human story. A creature that can eventually keep flame has extended the day, softened food, altered digestion, and created a glowing center around which attention can gather. Cooking, when it becomes regular, may have major consequences. Heat breaks down tough plant tissues and makes some foods easier to chew and digest. It can increase the energy gained from certain foods and reduce time spent processing them with teeth and jaws. Some researchers have argued that cooking helps support larger brains and smaller digestive systems, though the exact timing and scale remain debated. Whether fire caused these changes or joined a wider set of dietary and technological shifts is still uncertain. But the possibility is powerful. The human body may have been shaped not only by what it ate, but by the fact that it learned to transform food before eating it. The Acheulean tool tradition, associated especially with Homo erectus and later hominins, brings a new kind of visual order into stone. Hand axes and cleavers, shaped on both sides, sometimes with striking symmetry, appear across vast regions for immense spans of time. They are practical tools, but they also reveal planning, skill, and learned technique. A hand axe is not merely a broken rock. It is a form imagined before it is finished, carried through repeated strikes, corrected by eye and hand. Not every Acheulean tool is elegant, and not every toolmaker worked the same way. But the tradition shows that hominin minds were increasingly able to impose shape on raw material. Homo erectus becomes especially important because it carries the story beyond earlier limits, with longer legs, more human-like body proportions, and a capacity for long-distance movement. Homo erectus or closely related forms expand beyond Africa into Eurasia. This is not a single heroic migration, but a spreading over many generations, following habitats, water, food, and opportunity. By this stage, the descendants of small mammals that once survived beneath the broken Cretaceous sky have become travelers across continents. They do not yet carry written memory, but they carry tools, bodies built for endurance, and minds increasingly shaped by cooperation and learning. Still, much of their inner life is hidden. Did they use gestures in complex ways? Did they have early vocal communication beyond the calls of other primates? How much did they teach, imitate, plan, or remember? Across seasons, fossils cannot answer completely. Stone tools preserve action, not thought. Footprints preserve movement, not intention. Hearths, when secure, preserve warmth, not stories. yet the pattern is unmistakable. The hominin line is becoming an animal lineage that survives by changing the environment around the body, not only by waiting for the body itself to change. The old chain remains visible beneath the new one. The asteroid opened ecological space. Mammals diversified. Primates learned branches. Apes learned posture and reach. Hominins learned the ground. Homo begins to learn stone, distance, food transformation, and perhaps firelit cooperation. The road from dinosaurs to apes has become the road from apes to toolmakers, and the story has entered a stranger phase. Evolution is no longer only anatomical. It is behavioral, technological, social, and cumulative. The body still matters, but now a sharp stone in the hand can matter too. And at the edge of the fire, whether occasional at first or later controlled, a new kind of animal begins to make survival something that can be taught. Asia enters the story not as a single destination, but as a vastness. It is mountains, monsoon forests, dry basins, river corridors, cold plateaus, tropical islands, temperate woodlands, deserts that shift with climate, and coastlines that appear and vanish as sea levels rise and fall. For apes and later humans, Asia is never one world. It is many worlds stitched together by migration, isolation, accident, and time. Once primate and ape evolution begins to spread beyond its earlier African centres, the Asian landmass becomes a place where bodies are tested by scale. Distance itself becomes a force of evolution. The first great movement to remember is not yet human. During the Miocene, apes expand into Eurasia through changing land connections and favourable climates. Warmer intervals and forested corridors allow hominoids to move from Africa into regions that later become Europe and Asia. These apes are not ancestors marching toward people in a straight line. They are varied, local experiments, each shaped by habitat, diet, competition, and climate. Some live in forested environments. Others appear in more seasonal woodlands. Some are known from jaws and teeth alone, forcing scientists to reconstruct entire lives from fragments worn by ancient chewing. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how many of these Eurasian apes are close to the ancestry of living great apes and humans, and how many belong to side branches that flourished for a time and vanished. This is where the story becomes especially difficult, because the fossil record of apes is both rich enough to tempt big conclusions and broken enough to resist them. In Europe, fossils such as Dryopithecus and related forms suggest that apes once inhabited landscapes far beyond the modern range of non-human apes. In Asia, the longer story eventually includes the lineage leading toward orangutans, as well as extinct relatives known from scattered remains. Later still, giant forms such as Gigantopithecus will live in parts of Asia, leaving behind massive teeth and jaws that hint at a large-bodied ape adapted to particular foods and forests. But much of this record is uneven. Teeth preserve well. Forest floors often do not preserve skeletons kindly. A forest can hold generations of living bodies and leave almost nothing behind. The surprising truth is that the modern geography of apes is a shrunken remnant. Today, non-human apes survive only in parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, and all are vulnerable. But the Miocene world once held apes across a far broader zone. Their retreat was not caused by one event. Cooling climates, drying trends, changes of forests, competition, and local extinctions all played roles. No single explanation fully accounts for why so many ape lineages disappeared while a few survived. But the pattern is clear enough. Eurasia was once an ape continent in a way the present world no longer suggests. Long after those Miocene ape movements, Another kind of traveller enters Asia Homo. The expansion of Homo erectus and related early humans beyond Africa marks a different chapter, one driven by walking bodies, tools, flexible diets, and the ability to live across a wider range of habitats. These humans do not carry the forest-bound limitations of earlier apes, though they still carry the ancient primate inheritance in their hands, eyes, and social awareness. They move through grasslands, river valleys, lake margins, woodlands, and coasts. They follow animals, water, stone sources, and seasonal opportunities. Their migrations are not single expeditions. They are slow expansions over many generations, with populations advancing, retreating, splitting, and adapting as climates change. Asia magnifies every uncertainty. A population moving into Western Asia faces one set of landscapes. A population reaching South Asia faces monsoon rhythms, forests, rivers, and coastlines. A population in Northern Asia faces cold, seasonality, and open steppe. A population moving toward islands faces sea barriers, exposed land during low sea levels, and ecological worlds unlike mainland habitats. The map is never stable. During glacial periods, sea levels fall and connect lands that are now separated. During warmer periods, waters rise and isolate populations again. What survives in the record suggests repeated movement rather than one clean wave. Homo erectus in Asia becomes one of the most enduring examples of this expansion. Fossils from places such as Java and China show that early humans reached far beyond Africa and persisted for immense spans of time. Their tools, bodies, and environments vary, and the details of classification remain debated. Some fossils once grouped easily under familiar names are now re-examined with greater caution. Deep time rarely respects tidy categories. A skull from one region, a jaw from another, a stone tool layer elsewhere, and a date revised by new methods can alter the entire shape of the migration story. Asia also becomes a place where human evolution branches in ways that were almost invisible until recently. For a long time, the story of later archaic humans focused mainly on Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, and modern humans emerging from Africa. Then genetic research changed the map. DNA extracted from tiny fossil fragments revealed that another population, now called Denisovans, had existed somewhere in the vast Asian world. Their physical remains are scarce, almost shockingly so, but their genetic signal appears in ancient DNA and in some present-day populations. This does not mean Denisovans are central to the origin of apes. Of course, they appear very late, long after apes and hominins are established. But they show how Asia preserves hidden human histories, where entire populations can remain nearly invisible in bones yet survive in genetic traces. The Denisovan discovery is a reminder that fossils alone can understate ancient diversity. A cave fragment, a tooth, a piece of bone too small to identify by shape alone, these can hold a genome, and a genome can reveal a population no one knew how to see. In Asia, where environments range from humid tropics that destroy DNA to cold caves that preserve it, the record is uneven in extreme ways. Some regions may have hosted ancient humans for tens of thousands of years and left a little recoverable evidence. Others preserve a single fragment that changes the global story. The evidence remains incomplete, but the lesson is clear. The human past in Asia was not empty between Africa and Europe. It was dense, layered, and strange. For the wider story that began with the dinosaurs, this Asian expansion shows how far the chain of consequences has travelled. The asteroid did not create Homo erectus, Denisovans, or modern humans directly. It opened a world in which mammals could radiate. That radiation eventually allowed primates, then apes, then hominins, then humans to appear. By the time early humans move across Asia, the original catastrophe is no longer visible in their world. There is no memory of fire in the sky, no awareness of the clay boundary, no knowledge that their own bodies belong to a story that began with small mammals surviving darkness. Yet the connection remains buried beneath them, layer under layer. Across Asia, the unknown becomes almost a landscape of its own. Vanished ape lineages leave teeth in old sediments. Early humans leave stone tools beside ancient lakes. Later archaic humans leave fragments of DNA inside bones and inside living descendants. Mountains rise between populations. Deserts expand and contract. Forests retreat and return. Coastlines shift beyond recognition. The story is not one of steady progress, but of repeated crossings into uncertainty. Each migration carries the same ancient question that has followed life since the extinction. Can a body shaped by one world survive the next, in Asia, again and again? The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no, and often hidden until a small fragment comes back into the light. The deepest parts of human history often return through the smallest openings, not through temples, cities, or inscriptions, but through a tooth, a sliver of bone, a jaw fragment, a layer of ash, a footprint hardened by chance, or a trace of DNA hidden inside mineralized tissue. By the time the story reaches the later human world, the bodies involved are no longer early apes or the first hominins feeling their way across woodland mosaics. They are members of the genus Homo, spread across continents, shaped by tools, climates, migrations, and encounters with other human populations. Yet the method of discovery still echoes the beginning. Just as the road toward primates could be glimpsed in tiny teeth of Purgatorius, whole branches of humanity can sometimes be found in remains so small they nearly escape notice. Denisova Cave sits in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, a place where landscapes fold together forest, steppe, mountain, cold air, seasonal movement, and long corridors between Western Eurasia and deeper Asia. It is not a grand monument. It is not a lost city. It is a cave with layers, and layers of memory. Sediment accumulates slowly, carrying stone tools, animal bones, traces of fire, fragments of human presence, and the dust of climates that come and go. For archaeologists, such a place is valuable because repeated occupation can stack time inside a single chamber. Different human groups may enter the same shelter across tens of thousands of years, not knowing who came before, leaving behind enough for the cave to become a kind of archive. The archive changed human origins because it refused to match the old map. For many years, the late Pleistocene story seemed complicated but manageable. Neanderthals occupied much of Europe and Western Asia. Modern humans emerged from Africa and later spread widely. Other archaic humans existed in older periods, but the later drama often centered on those two populations. Then, DNA from Denisova Cave revealed something unexpected, a distinct archaic human group related to Neanderthals, but not the same as them. The physical evidence was astonishingly limited. A finger bone fragment, teeth. Later, a jaw from the Tibetan plateau connected through protein and genetic evidence to Denisovan ancestry, and a growing field of environmental DNA and ancient genomes. A whole population came into view first as a genetic signal, almost a ghost before it had a face. This is one of the great reversals in the study of the past. Traditionally, bones came first and identity followed from anatomy. Scientists examined skulls, jaws, brow ridges, teeth, limb proportions, and tools, then argued about species and relationships. With Denisovans, genetics opened the door before the body was clearly known. A small bone fragment that could not have told its full story by shape alone carried DNA that revealed a sister group to Neanderthals. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate what Denisovans looked like across their range, how varied they were, and how many populations may be hidden under that single name. But the discovery proved that the human family tree was not merely missing details, it was missing entire branches. Denisovans matter here not because they begin ape evolution, which of course they do not. They appear unimaginably late in the chain, after mammals, primates, apes, hominins, and Homo have already been shaped by tens of millions of years of change. But they matter because they reveal the final chapters of that chain as more tangled than once believed. The same long history that begins with small mammals surviving after the dinosaurs eventually produces multiple human populations spread across Eurasia, meeting, separating, adapting, and sometimes interbreeding. The human past is not a clean replacement sequence, it is a braided river. The relationship between Denisovans, Neanderthals, and modern humans shows this clearly. Genetic evidence indicates that Denisovans and Neanderthals shared a common ancestor after their lineage split from the ancestors of modern humans. Later, Neanderthals and Denisovans diverge from each other, but divergence did not mean permanent separation. Ancient genomes show contact between groups. A famous individual from Denisova Cave had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a direct sign that these populations sometimes met and had children together. Modern humans, too, interbred with Denisovan-related groups after leaving Africa. Today, Denisovan ancestry survives at varying levels in some populations, especially in parts of Oceania, island Southeast Asia, and to lesser degrees elsewhere in Asia. What vanished as a distinct population did not vanish entirely from the living world. One of the most striking Denisovan legacies concerns adaptation to high altitude. A genetic variant associated with life at high elevation in Tibet appears to have come from Denisovan-related ancestry. This does not mean Denisovans alone mastered every high mountain environment, nor does it mean the story is simple, but it suggests that ancient interbreeding could pass on traits later useful in extreme conditions. A population adapted in one world can leave a genetic tool that another population uses in a different future. In this sense, survival can be inherited across disappearance. A vanished group may continue not as a name, a culture, or a visible body, but as a biological advantage carried quietly by descendants of encounters long forgotten. The cave also reminds us how little physical evidence may survive from enormous histories. If Denisovans had not lived in places where DNA could endure, they might still be nearly invisible. Warm, wet environments destroy genetic material quickly. Acidic soils erase bones. Forests recycle bodies. Coastlines drown old camps as seas rise. Across Asia, many Denisovan or Denisovan-related populations may have lived in places that left no recoverable DNA at all. This means the current map is almost certainly incomplete. Denisova Cave is not necessarily the centre of Denisovan life. It is the place where the evidence happened to survive well enough for modern science to recognise it. That lesson reaches backward through the whole script. Purgatorius is known largely through teeth. Early primates often appear as fragments. Miocene apes are reconstructed from jaws, molars, partial limbs, and rare skulls. Early hominins emerge from broken pelvises, femurs, skull bases, and footprints. Denisovans emerge from DNA in a small bone. Deep history is not a complete library. It is a burned archive where some pages remain sharp and others are ash. The story must be told with confidence where evidence is strong and humility where it is not. In Denisova Cave, the ancient human story becomes both more intimate and more mysterious. The people who entered that shelter made tools, used fire, moved through harsh seasonal landscapes, and belonged to populations whose range may have extended far beyond the Altai. Yet their faces remain mostly unknown. Their languages, if they had them in forms we would recognize, are gone. Their social worlds are gone. Their memories are gone. What survives is enough to overturn a simple narrative, but not enough to make them fully visible. No single explanation fully accounts for their disappearance as a distinct population. Climate shifts, small population sizes, competition, absorption into modern human groups, local extinctions, and changing habitats may all have played roles. The answer likely differs from region to region. The cave that changed human origins therefore does something larger than add another extinct group to a list. It changes the feeling of the whole story. From the asteroid onward, the past is not a straight line of winners replacing losers. It is a web of survivors, side branches, hidden continuities, and vanished experiments that sometimes leave unexpected traces. Dinosaurs disappear, but birds remain. Ancient mammals vanish, but mammals flourish. Many primates die out, but some branches continue. Miocene apes decline, but a few ape lines survive. Denisovans vanish as a people, but parts of their inheritance remain in living bodies. The cave teaches that disappearance is not always absolute, and survival is not always visible from the outside. The strangest thing about Denisovans is that their most abundant remains are not bones. They are living fragments of inheritance, scattered through the genomes of people who have never seen the Altai Mountains, never entered the Siberian cave, and may never have heard the name Denisovan at all. A tooth can sit in a museum drawer. A finger bone can rest inside a laboratory record. A jaw can emerge from a cold plateau. But DNA travels differently. It passes through bodies, families, migrations, islands, valleys, and generations. It can outlast the name of the people who carried it first. It can survive after their tools are gone, after their shelters are emptied, after their languages fall silent, and after their faces can no longer be reconstructed with confidence. This is where the old idea of extinction becomes complicated. In the simplest sense, Denisovans are gone. There is no known living Denisovan population, no community carrying an unbroken Denisovan identity, no oral tradition that can be securely traced back to them. As a distinct archaic human group, they disappear from the visible record, yet parts of their ancestry remain inside modern humans. The amount varies widely. Some present-day populations in Oceania, especially Papuan and some other Melanesian groups, carry notable Denisovan ancestry. Some indigenous populations of island Southeast Asia and nearby regions also preserve traces. Smaller signals appear across parts of Asia. These patterns do not imply one encounter in one place. They suggest a more complex history of contact with Denisovan-related populations, perhaps multiple events involving groups that were themselves genetically diverse. That last point matters. Denisovan may be a convenient label for a set of related archaic humans, rather than a single uniform people spread neatly across Asia. The genetic evidence suggests deep structure, meaning Denisovan-related populations may have been separated from one another for long periods, adapting to different regions before some of them met modern humans. A Denisovan group in Siberia may not have been identical to a Denisovan-related group farther south or east. The people whose ancestry entered the genomes of Oceanians may have belonged to a population not yet represented by a clear fossil skeleton. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the number, timing, and geography of these interbreeding events. But the broad lesson is already clear: the late human world was not a simple map of modern humans replacing everyone else. It was a landscape of encounters. Those encounters were biological, but they were also ordinary in the most human sense. Populations met because they moved through overlapping worlds, river valleys, forest edges, mountain corridors, coastlines, cold steppes, and islands exposed or isolated by changing seas. The people involved did not think of themselves as branches on an evolutionary tree. They were living bodies in local landscapes, searching for food, shelter, safety, and continuity. When modern humans leaving Africa entered parts of Eurasia, they met other humans already there, including Neanderthals in the west and Denisovan-related groups farther east. Sometimes contact left descendants. Sometimes it may not have. Sometimes populations may have avoided each other, competed, exchanged knowledge, or simply passed through the same region in different generations. Bones rarely preserve the social details. DNA preserves the fact of contact, not the story of how it felt. The relationship between Denisovans and Neanderthals adds another layer. They were sister groups, closer to each other than either was to modern humans, yet not isolated forever. The individual from Denisova cave with a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that these groups sometimes met closely enough for family lines to cross. That discovery has a quiet force. It turns abstract population diagrams into something intimate. Two archaic human lineages, separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, still remained close enough biologically to produce a child. The fossil itself is fragmentary, but the genome is eloquent. It shows that deep human history was braided not only between modern humans and archaic groups, but among archaic groups themselves. Adaptation is where Denisovan inheritance becomes even more tangible. The best-known case is the high-altitude genetic variant associated with Tibetan populations, linked to Denisovan-related ancestry and helpful in low-oxygen environments. At high elevations, the body must deal with thin air, and the wrong physiological response can be costly. A variant inherited from an archaic human population appears to have helped some modern humans thrive on the Tibetan plateau. This does not mean Denisovans were all mountain specialists, or that every high-altitude adaptation came from them. It means that contact with an extinct population provided genetic material that natural selection later favoured in a demanding environment. The past became useful without being remembered. Other Denisovan-derived genetic variants may have influenced immunity, metabolism, or responses to local environments. Though these cases are often more complex and debated, genes do not act like simple charms passed from one species to another. A variant can help in one context, do little in another, or become harmful under different conditions. Some inherited archaic DNA may have been removed by natural selection over time. Some persisted neutrally. Some became advantageous. No single explanation fully accounts for the survival of Denisovan ancestry in modern populations, because genomes are shaped by chance, population size, selection, migration, and history all at once. But the existence of those fragments shows that interbreeding was not evolutionary noise. In some cases, it mattered. And still, the Denisovan body remains frustratingly hard to see. Their teeth suggest they could be robust in certain ways. The jaw from the Tibetan plateau indicates a powerful archaic human form adapted to a highland environment, though it does not give a complete face. DNA allows scientists to infer some traits cautiously, but inference is not the same as a full skeleton. Their skin color, hair form, facial variation, body proportions, and cultural range remain uncertain. Popular images often fill the gap with invented faces, but the honest portrait is partial. What survives in the record suggests they were diverse archaic humans, related to Neanderthals, spread across parts of Asia and capable of living in harsh environments. Much beyond that remains open. Their culture is even more elusive. Stone tools appear in Denisova cave layers, and ornaments and other artifacts have been discussed in connection with the site. But assigning particular objects to Denisovans, Neanderthals, or modern humans can be difficult when occupations overlap across time. A cave can be used by different populations in different periods, and sediments can complicate associations. It is tempting to give every beautiful or surprising object to the most mysterious group, but that is not how careful archaeology works. The evidence remains incomplete. Denisovans certainly made and used tools. They survived across challenging landscapes. They belong to the broader human world of learning and adaptation. But the details of their symbolic life, language, rituals, and social identity are mostly beyond reach. Their disappearance as a distinct population may not have been one disappearance at all. In some regions, Denisovan-related groups may have been absorbed into expanding modern human populations through interbreeding. In others, small populations may have faded as climates shifted, prey moved, forests changed, or social networks broke. Some may have lived in isolated refuges longer than the current evidence can prove. Asia is too large, and its preservation too uneven, for a single neat ending. Scholars still debate how late Denisovan-related groups survived in different places, and future discoveries may redraw the map again. The safest conclusion is that their world ended unevenly, leaving behind not one final scene, but many local endings. This returns the story to the larger pattern of life after catastrophe. Disappearance is rarely pure. The non-avian dinosaurs vanish, but birds carry dinosaur ancestry into every modern sky. Early mammals die in countless lineages, but mammals inherit the land. Ancient primates vanish from northern forests, but primates continue elsewhere. Miocene apes disappear in great numbers, but a few ape branches survive. Denisovans vanish as a recognizable people, but their genetic shadows remain in living blood. The past is not only underfoot in stone. Sometimes it is within the body itself, silent, functional, unnamed, moving forward long after the world that produced it has gone dark. By the time Denisovan ancestry becomes a shadow in living genomes, the asteroid is no longer an event so much as a buried origin. The crater is hidden beneath younger rocks and sea. The boundary clay lies in cliffs, cores, and badlands. The forests that burned are gone beyond recognition. The dinosaurs that once dominated the land survive only through birds and fossils, while the mammals that endured in darkness have become almost everything large and warm-blooded that now moves across the planet. It is tempting to tell this as a victory story, with mammals rising, primates refining, apes awakening, and humans finally arriving to understand it all. But deep history is less flattering than that. It is not a ladder of triumph. It is a record of repeated losses, with survival passing through narrow openings. The title says that when dinosaurs disappeared, ape evolution began. The truer meaning is slower and more haunting. Ape evolution did not begin in the ash itself. No ape clung to a burned Paleocene branch. No hominoid watched ferns return after the impact. What began was the long ecological rearrangement that eventually made apes possible. Non-avian dinosaurs vanished. Mammals expanded into worlds once difficult to enter. Among those mammals, tiny forms near the roots of primates found opportunity in recovering forests. Their descendants and relatives learned the language of branches, grasping, seeing, balancing, remembering. Warm greenhouse canopies spread them across ancient continents. Cooling climates later cut those worlds apart. Some primate lines vanished, others continued. Anthropoids emerged. Monkeys and apes separated, and only after tens of millions of years did true apes begin their own radiation in the Miocene. That delay matters because it protects the story from becoming myth. Evolution is not a sudden reward handed to one group because another group falls. The disappearance of the dinosaurs opened space, but space alone does not create destiny. Mammals had to survive. Forests had to return. Climate had to shift. Continents had to create corridors and barriers. Teeth, limbs, eyes, brains, shoulders, feet, and hands had to change in thousands of small ways. Most experiments failed. Many left no descendants. The living world is not made from all that ever succeeded. It is made from the few successes that happened not to be erased afterward. In that sense, every living ape is a survivor of survivors. Gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans are not representatives of a crowded modern empire. They are remnants of a once much wider ape world. During the Miocene, hominoids spread through Africa and Eurasia in forms now mostly gone. Some crossed forests that no longer exist. Some fed in seasonal woodlands. Some lived near ancient shores, lakes, and river systems erased by uplift, erosion, and desert. New fossils such as early Miocene apes from Africa and northern Africa's crossroads remind us that the ape record is still unfolding. Yet even with new discoveries, the evidence remains incomplete. We see fragments of a vanished diversity, not the full living forest. Humans, too, are not the obvious conclusion of the ape story. The hominin line begins as one uncertain branch among others, marked first by changes in posture and movement rather than by large brains or civilization. Upright walking appears before writing, before farming, before metal, before cities, before even the earliest secure firelit worlds of later humanity. The feet change, then the hands gain new freedom, then stones become tools, then tools become traditions, then movement carries Homo across continents. Each step feels meaningful in hindsight, but none guarantees the next. A bipedal ape could have vanished. A tool-making population could have remained local. A climatic shift could have closed a corridor. A small group could have failed to survive one difficult generation, and the story would have taken another path. The Denisovans sharpen that lesson because they show how much of human history can disappear while still leaving traces. They were not primitive shadows waiting to be replaced. They are humans of another kind, adapted to parts of Asia, related to Neanderthals, and connected to modern humans through interbreeding. Their bones are scarce, their appearance uncertain, their cultures mostly hidden, but their inheritance remains in some living populations. They remind us that disappearance can be partial. A people can vanish as a distinct presence and still leave behind a useful gene, a fragment of ancestry, a biological echo of encounters no one remembers. What survives in the record suggests that our own history is less a clean river than a braided floodplain. splitting and rejoining under changing skies. The same pattern reaches back to the dinosaurs. Non-avian dinosaurs are gone, yet birds carry dinosaur ancestry into the present with every wing beat. Ancient mammals died in countless forms, yet mammals reshaped the Cenozoic. Early primates vanished from old northern forests, yet primates endured elsewhere. Miocene apes disappeared in numbers far greater than living species suggest, yet the ape line did not end. Denisovans are gone, yet their DNA remains. Extinction is real, absolute for many lineages, and often final. But inheritance can be stranger than survival. Sometimes the world loses a body and keeps a trait. Sometimes it loses a population and keeps a gene. Sometimes it loses an empire of giants and, millions of years later, produces small animals capable of asking what happened. This is the deepest mystery in the story, not that life changes, but that it carries memory without intention. Teeth remember diet, bones remember movement, sediments remember ash, genomes remember contact, landscapes remember seas, forests, droughts, and ice through the chemistry locked inside them. No creature chooses to become a message to the future, yet the future reads it anyway. The asteroid scar, the Purgatorius tooth, the Miocene ape jaw, the Laetoli footprint, the stone flake, the Denisovan genome, all are different kinds of memory left by a planet that never promised to preserve anything. So the road from dinosaurs to apes is not a straight line drawn through time. It is a long unfolding of possibility after devastation. It begins with darkness, but not with purpose. It moves through burrows, roots, branches, warm forests, cooling climates, broken corridors, African woodlands, Miocene experiments, upright bodies, stone tools, migrations, caves, and living blood. At each stage, the future depends on fragile continuities. The ancestors of apes survived because earlier mammals survived. The ancestors of humans survived because some apes adapted to changing worlds. Modern humans exist because many earlier populations endured long enough to meet, merge, vanish, or continue. The story is not only about what disappeared, it is about what disappearance allowed, what survival preserved, and what still remains hidden inside the living. The long arc quiets here, not because the story is finished, but because no story this old truly ends. The impact winter fades, the ferns rise, forests return, then retreat, then return in other forms. Small mammals climb into the green, and millions of years later, apes move through branches beneath warmer skies. Later still, some of their descendants cross open ground, carry stones, follow rivers, enter caves, and leave fragments behind for another age to find. Time does not keep memory the way humans do. It does not protect the important things. It preserves a tooth and destroys a face. It saves a footprint and erases a lifetime. It hides a genome in a splinter of bone and lets whole populations pass almost unseen. The past that reaches us is not the full past. It is what survived fire, water, pressure, burial, erosion, and chance. And yet, from those fragments, a shape appears. Not a perfect shape, not a final answer, but a long thread of endurance running through disaster. The dinosaurs vanish from the land, but not entirely from the sky. The first primate relatives appear as tiny clues in a recovering world. Apes arrive late, after climates and continents have changed the planet again and again. Humans come later still, carrying within them not only their own ancestry, but traces of other human worlds that faded before history began. Perhaps that is what makes deep time feel so unsettling. It reminds us that every living form is temporary, but nothing exists alone. Each body is a crossing point of ancient accidents. Each breath belongs to a chain that passed through darkness somewhere before us. The story of apes does not begin with apes. The story of humans does not begin with humans. It begins in vanished landscapes, in small survivals, in the quiet persistence of life after the sky burned. Long after the crater cools, a bird lifts from a branch. Somewhere below, a mammal moves through leaves. Farther ahead in time, an ape pauses at the edge of a woodland, and beyond that, a human hand closes around a stone. The planet keeps turning. The evidence waits in silence, and beneath everything living, the old ash remains.